De immigratieverhalen van Nederlanders zijn onze Australische geschiedenis. Bij uitzondering een gedeelte van ons programma in het Engels, want schrijfster Nell Jones spreekt geen Nederlands. Haar moeder Anneke Zuiding ook niet echt meer. The Lost Sister of Groningen. Een heftig verhaal. Hiervoor moeten we even terug naar 1947 in Groningen. De kleine Anneke Zuiding wordt bij een pleeggezin geplaatst door haar vader. Haar moeder, die ze niet kent, komt plotseling opdagen bij school, maar als vader van deze bezoekjes hoort, komt er snel een einde aan. Anneke gaat van het ene pleeggezin naar het andere en komt dan uiteindelijk als 12-jarig meisje met een getrouwde zuster naar Australië. Hier aangekomen gaat het opnieuw mis. Zuslief verlaat haar man voor een nieuwe liefde en Anneke staat opnieuw buiten. De oplossing een pleeggezin, waar de nu 13-jarige Anneke werd gezien als een goedkope hulp in de huishouding. Kost en inwoning moest genoeg zijn voor dit ongewenste meisje. Nell en Anneke kwamen naar de studio om over deze geschiedenis te vertellen. The Lost Sister of Groningen, Nell Jones.
When I was a child growing up, Mum used to tell me little snippets of stories, and I became very interested. They sounded, that there was more to it than she was telling me. So when I sort of got to about 40, I thought, well, look, I've learnt a lot over this time. I would really love to put this story together because I thought it was a great story to tell. I mean, it's a very harrowing and sad story, but it took a little bit of time to convince Mum. And I just turned 40 and I said to her, look, let's go and find out and rediscover what really happened to you. I mean, she'd probably blocked a little bit of it out, I think, over time. Off we went in 2004 and went off to Groningen and retraced her steps. We found out all kinds of things that we hadn't previously known, and then it became quite different. It wasn't what I imagined would be. It certainly changed. It was more devastating than I originally had thought.
Anneke, your story is quite devastating.
It's coming from a broken home and going through all the traumas of staying with different people and being in an orphanage at some time in the Netherlands. And never really knowing your parents. I never knew my mother. My mother came to my school when I was about 5 years or a little bit older maybe. She just fronted up and said, I'm your mother. Well, that's pretty sort of devastating for a young child.
You actually remember this, or you remember this?
No, I remember this. I remember this is her coming up to the school and say, I'm your mother. And it's always there in the back of your mind that your background has not been as happy as other people's who come from a normal family with parents. It's always been, quite a hard time.
The mother fronts up one day and says, I'm your mother. Did she say anything else? Did she tell you anything about your past or about your family?
No, she never really did. She just started meeting me every now and then, unbeknown to my father, who had put me with a foster family. And she would turn up maybe once a fortnight and sneak me out to go for coffee. But no, she never really tried to justify how it all happened. And it didn't last very long anyway because my father heard about it and stopped it immediately. I wasn't allowed to see my mother anymore after that.
So what do you know about your father?
Not a great deal. He just spent most of his life trying to find homes for us foster parents. I only lived with him very briefly for about maybe a couple of years. I can't quite remember exactly how long. And when he remarried, and that didn't last very long, I was put back into foster homes or orphanage.
You said us. There were more of you?
Yes, there were 3 sisters. My brother was 14 and he had left home to go to sea. He lied about his age, I think. But I was the baby of the family.
What happened after the foster family? Because you had various foster families.
I had various. When my father sort of ran out of people to look after us, I ended up staying with my sister, who at the time was married, in Overschie.
Near Rotterdam.
Yeah, near Rotterdam. She was married, had a small child. Actually, that was a very happy time for me because I absolutely adored my sister. And they decided to migrate to Australia, and she put me on her passport. My father gave permission for me to go. I think it was a guardian.
Gunship, yeah.
Yes, that's how we came to Australia.
How old were you then?
I just turned 13 when we arrived.
But not all went that well. What happened then, Nell?
Well, when Mum came to Australia, her elder sister fell in love with another man on the boat on the way over. So that caused a lot of complications. They went to Bonegilla I think Kobe stayed for a little while with the family, but then one day she just had left and went to meet her new man, my mother's brother-in-law. He already had a little child with him and Anneke, and so he couldn't really, I suppose in those days it would be frowned upon that, you know, you couldn't really have a young girl living with you. He really didn't know what to do, and he had to get work, and of course, so they rang then the Good Neighbour Council, and the Good Neighbour Council sort of looked after the migrants of the day. They said, oh, we have a Dutch family in South Australia that you could go to. So Mum ended up living with Berendina van der Sandy, who she stayed there for 5 years.
7 years.
7 years. And she had quite a harrowing past as well, because she was a Dutch Indonesian and she had been in a Japanese war camp.
Oh,
so she had quite a substantial psychological problems. And they had 3 boys.
So you were 13 at the time, Anneke, when you went there. Yeah. And these boys were how old?
I think they were 9, 10 and 11. I'm not,
How did you fit into this family?
I think they tried to do their best, but I don't think it worked out very well for me, because I had to look after everything. I cooked and cleaned and...
Sort of unpaid help.
Yes, because Dean, her name was Dean, decided to go back because there was a shortage of teachers at that time to become a teacher. And I virtually took over the household. I mean, she was very regimented and used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I think, and she'd organised a room every morning to be thoroughly cleaned before you went to school.
That sounds very old-fashioned. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you cope with that?
I think I coped all right, but I think in the end, because I used to do the cooking and come home and do some ironing, and I had to ride to school. I can't remember exactly how many kilometres, but it was all uphill coming home, and I was very tired. And when I did my intermediate, as it was called then, I didn't do all that terribly well because I was just too tired to study most of the time.
So how did your life continue?
When I turned 16, 17, I was very lucky. I met my husband, who lived not far from there. I met him at a church dance, as you used to go to those church dances. He came from a very big, loving family, and they took me on board, and I think that became my family. Yes, a big turning point in my life.
Yeah.
And in 18 months, we're going to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So,
congratulations.
Yes, so it's and since then, my life has been good.
What did you find when you went back to Holland now?
But we did go and find, you know, records of where our aunties were put into work, and my grandfather would go then and collect their money, and they would have nothing. That's what he sort of did. And my other auntie, she got into some trouble, and she ended up being an institution. So he spent his time, you know, we found all these records, you know, from the institutions where she was sent, and, you know, we had these stories, and we talked very in depth about it. But once you get the records in front of you, like
That's
the
scary.
divorce thing was, you know, who the children go to, and my grandfather really had an objection to Oma having anything to do with the children, because she had actually abandoned the children during the wartime and had gone off for weeks at a time to stay at the Assen barracks where all the German soldiers were. So they would be left, and then he would come back from Germany. That was another thing we found out. He always told us that he was a slave labourer.
Yeah.
But I went to Germany to Bad Arolsen and looked up his records, and he wasn't at all, because the sisters always have memories of him coming back into Billitonstraat in Groningen and visiting. And so he actually was working in the German army and doing that. Those kinds of things really then cemented the story for me, and I was able to develop some characters out of that. I think that's
rather harrowing.
Yes,
it's a past that people don't like to think about, but
yes,
the reality was often very different.
And I think that's why he objected then for the mother. You know, in those court records from the divorce, it was actually saying, look, you know, her name was Anneke too, that, you know, she's leaving the children for 3 or 4 days. She's bringing German soldiers home. The children have seen this, and sort of Mum's elder sister Kobe, she was probably 15, and she remembered all that, and she was able to tell me a lot about that. And she would come up in the middle of the night and get up, and there would be some German soldiers in the room. So, you know, we found this funny thing. We found the cafe, the Haus de Beers, or the Haus de Mas, and they had a gigantic photo of my grandmother. She was supposed to be the most beautiful woman in Groningen, but, you know, you have memories of them, you know, calling out on the trains, Anneke, Anneke, you know, and she disappears. So this is really the worst part of the story, I think. you know, my point has always been, yes, they had this terrible time during the war, which really set the tone for the next 50 years for what was going to happen to their family. But, you know, you can't really blame the war for that. I really think that they just, both of them, and Mum doesn't mind me saying this, weren't very nice people at all. They were very selfish and
opportunistic.
Cruel. Yeah, and, you know, my grandfather's mother survived, and she lived till probably the 1960s, but he lost his father in 1920 to diabetes. So he, you know, the start of the novel, I've deliberately tried to keep, you feel a little bit sorry for him, but then he does show his real colours, and he's AKA the wolf.
I see.
So I found a lot of Dutch sayings that were about wolves, and I thought, well, this is actually a really great thing to use as a theme through the book.
Yeah.
So yes, and we've been back twice, haven't we?
Yes, but the first time I went back to Holland in 1980.
On your 40th birthday.
On my 40th birthday, my husband said, you must go back to Holland, because
Okay.
I never wanted to go back because I just wanted
Well, the
to...
memories weren't that wonderful, were they?
No, I didn't
No.
want to know about it, and I was very happy with my life in Australia, and I didn't really want to know about it. But my husband talked me into it because he couldn't understand, because he comes from this loving family. He said, you might regret it when you get older that you didn't make an effort. It didn't really work out very well, because I rang up my father. If you're living with the woman he married, my stepmother, and he told me on the phone, no, I don't really want to see you, I'm not really interested, and really, Anneke, I'm not really your father, so I don't know whether you're my daughter or not. So that was the end of that. So then I had to cope with, well, you know, I don't really know who my father is.
Yeah, who am I?
Yeah, who am I?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's-
But that
that's
question will never be answered. I thought of doing some DNA testing, but it all just got too complicated, and I've just let it go.
Can understand a certain amount. It's just that I've had enough of this.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
because what will you
yes.
achieve, actually?
Yes.
Yeah.
We did actually find, when I went to Bad Arolsen, all the records of when he was in and out of Holland during the war, and we matched up the dates, and there was just no way that he was there. So that makes it a little bit more, you know, we think that perhaps he wasn't there, and Mum, you know, Mum always says, well, perhaps I have a really lovely dad somewhere. You know, whether he was German or not, he probably could have been a lovely guy, because well, Berta certainly wasn't. So it really, the story just didn't stop when she left Holland. And that's what interested me as well. Every few years something else would happen, and you'd think, my goodness, you know, like this is still affecting your life.
Yeah.
When is it going to stop?
How are you now with your brothers and your sisters?
Yes, fine. I've got three sisters in Adelaide that I see regularly. Yes, I've never ever blamed my sister for what she did. It never really entered my mind.
No.
It's just that when you start talking about and bring things up, you think, yes, you did do the wrong thing. But I guess I've just put it out of my mind over these years.
You've now turned this into a book.
The Lost Sister of Groningen. I've got a website that I'm going to give away 3 signed copies, and also my father has made the paintings into print, so we would like to give away, you know, a print and a signed copy of the book as well. www.thelostsister, or one word, .ning, .ning.com.
Okay.
And if you go on there and join as a member, I will then go through and find some same sort of thing, you know, find a way of giving those away. That would be great.
That'll be fantastic.
Okay.
Good luck, and thanks for coming in.
Thank
That's all right.
you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.